Alrighty, it is set review season. I am joined by my good friend Travis. If you want kind of the full introduction, go back, check out the fire video previously, or in the playlist, or whatever you do on YouTube these days. We are moving on to the second element, which is ice. And our first ice is the Yeti Spaghetti himself, Umaro. Uh, Category 6, of course. 2 cost Job Yeti, which is one of the best jobs in the game, of course. For Ice in 1, you can discard Umaro from your hand to break a dull forward. Only during your turn. And otherwise, he is a vanilla 2 cost backup.
Thanks. I hate it.
I
I'll start if you don't mind, since it's
you're the 6th guy. You're the 6th guy. I'll let you go first.
When we won the Winter Cup, Umaro, the forward one, the 7 cost, saved our bacon because I had to use it against Neo X Death. And the Yeti Spaghetti one that people call the 4 cost that you can keep recurring is also a good piece of removal. Like, both of those Umaros I think are good and necessary. So you can't play it in the 6 package because of the name clash. Now, luckily, this one doesn't actually require any 6 synergy. You could just stick this in any deck you want. I do love backups that kind of feed into themselves, that like you can use additional effects, which is kind of nice. Man, if you could use this on your opponent's turn, I'd be so into it. Like, it costs 5 plus the 3 plus the discard, that's 5, and it has to be dull. Like, I don't understand why I can only do that during my turn. Like, let me use that as a summon response. So, like, I like the art. I like the idea of it. I don't think you can fit him in the 6 package. Man, like, if he could be used at summon speed, like, on their turn, I'm all for it. Other than that, like, I mean, it's fine. It's nice to have backups that, like, you can discard the excess copies.
I love the design space of this guy. I think it's a really neat design space for sure. The one other place I'm going to mention for this, Mono Ice is a deck that I think is closer to playable than people realize. And that deck is currently playing in Japan and in like Singapore, where it has some results. I kid you not, 20 backups.
Wow.
And a lot of those are vanillas. Now, a vanilla backup that is occasionally a bad summon might really go hard on that deck. It'd be really useful. Because that deck just wants to get to 5 backups as quickly as possible for Kurame to be threatening and for Kate Sith and all this other stuff. And having a backup that does something, like you can play the first one as a backup, the next 2 you draw are just bad summons. There's value in that. That's really interesting and it's unique. I think there's a chance just because of that. It's also very difficult to interact with this. Canceling auto or action abilities is so hard in Final Fantasy. You can't Amaterasu this. You can't Miss Dragon to cancel it or anything like that. It's like, to stop this, you gotta either cancel an action ability or you gotta activate the forward in response. So I think there's a chance for Umaro in that deck in particular. I don't even hate it that much in 6. There's maybe a world where you just don't play the other Umaro, and then like when you dull free stuff with your sets of party attacks after you get one Umaro down for the lock, like, maybe like you're drawing so many cards where the extra cost could matter less. There's a world this is actually an okay card, even in that.
That's not a world I want to live in.
Moving along, we have Umia, which is a Category 11 Bard backup. Cost 3 when Umia enters the field. Choose a character, freeze it if you control a Category 11 forward. Your opponent also discards 1 card. She's not like miserably bad, I don't think. Like freeze if you have the Category 11 forward on play, she is effectively free because you freeze your opponent's backup, you make them discard, so they're kind of paying for her in the same way you are. We've seen like the red mage from last set, that's just the 3 cost backup that like makes your opponent discard a card. Has seen a lot of play. Problem is now you have to line up this Category 11 forward. There's not any good like Shantoto LBs that you want to like play, or like a Prish. There are 11 forwards in Ice. There's the Ice Earth Prish. There's the Ice Shantoto Camelot. If you want to go that far back. Other than that though, I think that we just have better options for the same effect.
Ghoul knows how much I love the Opus 5 Edward Hero that made you discard an entry, and he had a fantastic special. Like, it's crazy to me. This card is like barely better than that, but also only if you meet a bunch of conditions. Like, yeah, I don't know. I don't. Yeah, you said it all.
I will say, for 11 screenshot art, I actually kind of like the screenshot. But
Yeah, the art actually is okay for that.
Kurame is back with a vengeance from Type 0. 4 cost, Job Instructor. When he enters the field, choose the same number of characters opponent controls as the number of backups you control. Freeze them. When he attacks, your opponent controls 4 or more adult characters. You get to draw a card. I kind of like him. I like that he's not restricted to mono ice in the same way the other Kurame was. The other Kurame has a very good special. You could run both in the deck. They both want to do the same thing.
Yeah.
Your opponent still has to kill this guy, because otherwise you have a draw engine now in ice, which is really strong. And then you could play this in like Ice Lightning, which is a deck that has a lot of very strong backup engines. And even has Type 0 support. You can run like a Risha if you wanted to in that deck. You could run this in like an Ice Wind deck even, potentially, and say, well, I'm on 5 backups. All your backups are now frozen. Right? That seems really potent, potentially. That's a very strong trade. Do I think that's enough on its own? I don't know, but I kind of like him. What do you think?
I mean, Ice has always been lacking for draw power, so it's nice that that's there. I'm a bit disappointed he's so similar to the other one that he wants you to have all these backups. And he dies Amaterasu. He doesn't have haste. Like, I do still think it's asking a few too many questions, and I would imagine people will cut this for consistency, that there's probably cards that just, this card always does the thing I need it to do, versus this guy where it's like, yeah. But if he sticks around, like, yeah, obviously he's going to very much pay for himself. So I would love to be wrong about that, but I have a feeling he'll get cut for consistency reasons.
I will say, this is maybe a personal thing. I'm starting to value Dice to Amaterasu less in
Really? Yeah.
in Ice in particular, because I think that like
Campaign
their hand is already so low most of the time anyway that like usually it's like if Rufus says actually I'm a Sephiroth, I'm probably okay with that if he dies immediately.
Yeah. That's fair.
Same for like Kurasame here. If they're gonna Amaterasu this, or if they're on no cards in hand, you just freeze the backups they don't have anymore, right?
Yeah.
So Ice is the one element that I think actually has the most capability to play around Amaterasu now, which is very interesting to me. So I kind of like him. We'll see. Oh, okay. Some stuff fell off the shelf over there. I think we have a little bit of a gust. It's a little warm here. It's turning a summer in down under.
Take a break?
No, we're good. We have Gogo, Category 6, with some of the funkiest mono art we've ever had on the card. 3 cost, Mime, and a Category 6 forward of the Gogo you control is put from the field into the break zone. Add it to your hand, only triggers once per turn. So the obvious intended thing here is you go Cyan. Cyan plays Gogo. Cyan sacks himself to protect somebody. Gogo says, get the Cyan right back, and you can play the Cyan again next turn. You can do it over and over again. Is that Magical Christmas Land? I don't know. I've heard some kind of fun stuff you could maybe do. I'm sure you're aware of this. What's Edgar's power?
7,000.
What is Sabin's ping?
8,000.
Does Sabin have any restrictions on who we can target?
He does not.
So you could go Sabin, shoot your own Edgar to get the Edgar back, so you can Edgar every single turn. Which is really funny. I don't know if it's any good.
Yeah.
But like that's another thing you could do. Maybe that gets you like 2 casts a turn for your lock. Now they have to kill this before they kill the lock, or the lock's coming right back down. But he also doesn't do anything by himself.
Yeah.
And that's generally the mark of a good card, is what have you done for me lately? So, I don't know. You're the 6 guy. Tell me if this is the best Go-Go in print for 6 or not.
I mean, it's adorable art. The other Go-Go, like, even in the 6 package, if he was around to see the 4 cost tomorrow repeat the trigger, or the Edgar repeat the trigger of Sabin, you could just blow people out. It was very difficult to line that up. I do like the Cyan play. I like that you could potentially just, hey, I'm just going to keep protecting with the Cyan over and over again. I also like that it triggers on your opponent's turn, so you could block with a card, and then, oh, you killed it. Nope, Gogo's going to bring it right back. But like it all implies that your opponent is just gonna like let you do all that. They can just kill this Gogo. It has no protection for itself, like unless you have the Cyan to protect it. They'll just get rid of him first, and now they'll clean your board out. So I hope he's great. Because again, I don't think you necessarily have to run the other Gogo. And maybe the Cyan, maybe that like little combo over and over again is just enough to make it worth it. I'll keep my fingers crossed. I don't know. Yeah, I'd have to see it.
It is kind of fun, actually. I just realized other Umaro also sacrifices himself.
Yes, yeah. Oh, I did want to mention that. Yeah, so you can sacrifice the Umaro, shoot for 8,000. Now instead of having to spend 2 cards to get him back, he just immediately comes back to your hand. Then again, that means you're going to have to replay him again to do it. So I don't know if that's really like saving you a cost, but you know, it's there. It works.
Yeah, I mean, like more so, you can kind of control it as well. Like I really almost like want to be able to trigger this myself for value. Umaro gives you a way of doing that if you're not going for like the really crazy Sabin Edgar big brain theory that a friend told me.
Yeah.
So we have the ice variant of these backups. I think the ice one is very strong. Again, I think Mono Ice is playing 20 ice backups in general. An odd costed backup that draws a card is just generally going to be really good here.
Mm-hmm.
We have Shiva. This is our ice icon from 16. Cost 7. When she enters the field or when Jill primes into Shiva, choose 2 dull forwards, break them. At the end of each of your turns, the 2 or more forwards opponent control put in the field and breaks in this turn. Your opponent discards 1 card. You've played a lot of ice.
I have.
And you and I probably are in agreement. One of ice's biggest problems is its inability to remove wide boards.
Yes.
Shiva is potentially a way of dealing with that. And I like the idea that like she could theoretically give you more value over time if you somehow manage to kill 2 forwards in the same turn in the future. I don't know how relevant that is outside of the very first turn you play her, though, admittedly, just because like I could just once you break the 2 forwards, how are you breaking more than 2 forwards in ice?
Yeah. I can't see that triggering outside the entry effect.
And also like I wonder if like you could just kill them before that would ever be relevant again. But it still does say, like, okay, break two dull forwards, break them, your opponent discards a card. And I just like that text enough by itself, honestly.
Yeah.
I also think that, like, Jill is one of the very few dominants that, like, actually is really solid on her own. So you could just play the Jill and just threaten your opponent, like, smile at them and say, hey, you want to do something about this? I'm going to, next turn she's going to pop off. You better remove this thing that didn't, cost me much. In those situations, I think this card seems really strong. So... we'll see. I wonder if that second effect is like more relevant in like a dominant icon deck, because then you have like Clive can proc it for her and really help with that, or maybe you're on like a Bahamut and use that to do it. So there's definitely ways that second effect could happen multiple times in the same game. But I mean, the biggest thing is just break 2 dull forwards and your opponent discards a card. Seems like really good text.
Yeah, I don't hate that. The only other thing I'll really mention. And I didn't really touch on this with Joshua and the Phoenix, but I just thought Phoenix was that good. I guess I didn't think of it. But, man, I was really hoping all the icons and their dominance would have specials so that they all naturally would feed into each other. Oh, you drew Jill, which you can't play Jill when she's on the field, but it's okay. And Shiva is the first of a few that actually don't have special abilities, so that part's really disappointing. Other than that, I mean, I do like kill 2 things, discard. I'm okay paying 7 for that. Plus, this won't die to an Amat. It kind of sucks they have to be dull. That's always going to be Ice's thing, I guess. But yeah, she seems fine. I'm not like really high on her or low on her. I'm kind of in the middle.
I mean, I'm starting to kind of wonder how big a deal the dull forward is for something like Shiva in particular. I think summons, I think it could be a problem because then you're really trying to interact with your opponent quickly. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of games where I played Ice Lightning where my opponent would have 5 dull frozen forwards on their side of the field. I feel like Shiva will have targets, I feel like, if you're going for her. We have our first Ice Legend, though, in Genesis. Category 7's Soldier, 5 cost, 9k. When Genesis or a Soldier enters your field, select one of the following actions. Either your opponent discards a card, or you choose 2 characters and dull freeze them, or your next Soldier gets cost reduced by 3. And let me actually jump over to the lovely Ruby Asami full art. This is such a weird one for me. I could see this card being completely broken. And Goodness knows they're never going to stop printing Category 7 support. We also have stuff like Ever Crisis that we'll probably get cards for in the future. That's going to have 3 new soldier names in it probably. That could break this card. This is such a huge nebulous buff to soldiers as a job. But does that exist now at all? Do we have there's the Light Cloud is really good. There's the Sephiroth Legend from last set. There's Opus 1 double discard for both player Sephiroth. There's a bunch of Zacks. Zack from LB is really nice with this because then you could small ping plus a discard. Zack getting extra text is really nice. I just don't know, because for this to be better than Rufus, you've got to get a second soldier in there somewhere, and I don't know where that second soldier's coming from most of the time.
Yeah, it has the potential to be absolutely broken, because it's just an insane effect if you can repeat over and over and over again. It dulls and freezes, doesn't just freeze like a lot of some of these cards have done lately. But even I'm looking at the soldiers right now in Materia Hunter, and not only is there the name clash, there's so few different names. A lot of them are already 3 cost or 5 cost. So the 3 cost ones you can't even make free because his last text says they can't become 0. If you could make a bunch of those 3 costs free, like the Angeal or the Zack Limit Break, man, I'd be really into it. I would love to see this card thrive because it's a cool idea, but it's the names are so limited. So if soldiers are ever great, this dude's gonna be busted. But I just don't know if it's there.
So the only other thing I'm going to say about this before we move on is our box topper for next set is known. And it is a Job Soldier Zack that plays a 2-cost Category 7, which can be Roche, which is another soldier. And that sounds really funny. Yeah. You go Genesis, and then Cloud, and then Zack, and now Zack has haste, and then Zack plays a Roche from the break zone, and all of a sudden your opponent's discarded 4 cards while you're building this big field. That seems really cool. I just need to see this in action before I really am going to call this in Genesis's favor. Moving along, we have Zalera the Death Seraph. This is our hero summon for Ice, Category 12. You can only cast Zalera the Death Seraph during your turn, which is never a line of text you want to see on your summons. Select one of the following 2 actions. Your opponent selects a forward of cost 5 or more they control, put it in the break zone, your opponent discards a card, or they do that for a cost 4 or less. So I don't know on this one. I mean, if your opponent has a card in hand, this is kind of like, casting a Tomos with a unit in play, right? They're paying 2, you're paying 4, and they sacrifice. And there are probably going to be games where you can, say, no, I really want your Une to go. I'm saying 5 or higher. The Une's gone. Mm-hmm. Right? That could very easily happen. But I also could see this sitting in your hand during your opponent's turn while they pop off like crazy and do all their crazy shenanigans, and you're sitting here with a summon that you can't cast. And I also see the situation your opponent has no cards in hand because you're discarding it in ice, and they go, okay, I'll sack my Leo LB that you paid 4 for, and this card's going to feel terrible. The truth probably going to be somewhere in between. What do you think?
I was so high on this card until 2 minutes ago when you read that first line of text because I missed that. I didn't realize it was limited to your turn. I was like, wow, this seems like a genuinely good ice summon. Nope. Oops. Missed that. I appreciate them wanting to explore different design space, but the whole point of a summon is that I can use it on your turn because otherwise they're inherently weaker. They don't come with a body. Ignoring that line, I like that she essentially can't miss. It's not like, okay, you have no dull forwards, I can't use this. As long as they have a 4, unless the forward is 4.5, which doesn't exist yet, she's going to get something, and she's going to get a discard. Like you said, though, man, if they have a Limit Break Leo, that's going to feel bad when they go, oh, okay, you can have the Leo. But if you can manipulate it and be like, aha, the only thing you have that's high is the demon, now I'll make you choose that. But I didn't realize that first line of text is there. That just bums me out now.
It's interesting seeing ice get more of these edict effects, these effects that make your opponent choose. They're starting to kind of move that out of water and into ice, and these effects have been very interesting because they can be really powerful, right? If your opponent only has one really, they only have an Une in play, right? This card's amazing. But if they have, a bunch of forwards and you can't control the field down to a small enough manageable size, this card's terrible. And it's the same thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know that ice, in the same way that water does, has the way to control. You can't just bounce this. Now it's almost right like you can in ice
Yeah.
or in water. Ice doesn't do that nearly as cleanly. So is that going to be a problem for this card? I think it's going to be experimented with. I think it's going to see some amount of play. I don't know if it's going to end up being the best ice summon.
Just out of curiosity, if they have no forward and you cast this, do they still discard?
They do.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah. It works the same way as like Chaos does.
Yeah, okay.
All right, moving along, we have Shantoto. This is another one of those Theatrhythm commons, category 11, Job Mage. The cost required to cast your summons is reduced by 1, and then you can dull her, choose a forward, dull freeze it. You can only use this ability if you cast a summon this turn. That second effect might as well almost not be there outside of maybe limited, I imagine.
Yeah.
The first effect is really interesting. We haven't had a lot of Goblin Electromancers as the magic term for this effect that people call it. It's like your instants and sorceries cost 1 less. However, I am not willing to pay 4 for this effect, so I think this card's pretty much dead on arrival.
Yeah, I wish this was essentially the ice version of Yuna backup. Like, I wish it specifically worked on ice summons, and then she was a backup that just flat reduced their costs. I don't even know if that would help ice summons, because they tend to not be very good, but that would be more interesting, at least.
Yeah, like if it was a backup, but even like a 4 for a back, like if it would cost 2, it might actually
Yeah, if
play
it costs 2.
Even if it was like a 2 cost 5k, it actually might be a really interesting card, I think. Because then you could get the value up by just casting 2 summons that turn, right?
Yeah.
But as she is, I don't think there's any world for her. Sorry, Shantoto. Alright, we got Jill. Jill is our dominant for Shiva. So again, category 16, 3 cost 7k. If you control a Clive or a Torgal, their cost required to cast Jill is reduced by 2. That's really nice. 1 cost, 7k. When Jill enters the field, choose a forward opponent controls, dull it, and freeze it. It's a little unfortunate it's only forwards. If you think about like the best of these effects, it's like, Laswell or Red Mage, these things that hit characters so you can attack backups as well. But I also don't know that, she has a very different upside than Laswell or Red Mage, right? Like her ability to prime into Shiva and become this big removal spell, right? Like I think it's completely reasonable as well to say I'm going to play Jill this turn, and the next turn I'm going to prime her, and then now your opponent's in this like awkward situation where they have a dull frozen forward that's still a target for Shiva the next turn.
Yeah.
And if they commit another forward, well, you can just go, well, I'm going to go Surges, dull that one, and then break both of them, right? So I think that she's actually like a dominant that's like very strong even just on field as like a threat, which is very unique for these. I think this card is just really good.
Yeah, I was bumming over the lack of character dull freeze over a forward, but like you said, it does feed into the Shiva. That's nice. I also do like her a lot better now that I know Torgal is an ice. When I didn't know what he was in, I was like, well, wait a minute, how many colors am I have to play like to get that reduction? So if you can play her for 1 and then prime paying 3, I think that's going to feel really good.
Yeah. And I don't even think paying 3 for her is that bad, or like, cheating her in off of an Al Cid. She feels like a decent Al Cid play. Like, Al Cid's going to also freeze a bunch of forwards when she comes into play as well. So now you've got this, like, again, you kind of create these 2 threats at once, which I think is the really important thing with Al Cid.
Mm-hmm.
Squall, another one of our Theatrhythm commons. When he enters the field, or put from the field in the break zone, choose a dull forward, deal at 5k. All these are above curve, weirdly. He's a 3 CP 8k, which is not Ice's thing at all.
Yeah.
This would be a bad common in Opus 1, so...
Yeah.
I guess it would be okay in Opus 1. It's like pretty similar to that old Squall, but I don't think this card's really ever going to see the inside of a competitive slave, so we can move along.
Yeah. Yep.
Terra. This card actually is, for all these little Theatrhythm commons, some of them are little gems in the rough. Really simple card. Category 6, 3 cost, EX Burst. When she enters the field, choose a summon, add it to your hand. She's Lulu.
Yeah. Yeah, cheaper version than her Fire or Opus 10 Fire version by 1. So, yeah, for one of these commons, this actually is quite fine.
Yeah, she's Lulu that trades the second effect off for EX Burst, which I think is that's pretty reasonable, right?
Yeah.
Ice Wind will definitely play her. I think that even Mono Ice could play her to get the burst count up. It isn't only ice summon, she gets any summon back, so if you're in a multi-element deck, you don't have to play ice summons with her, you can play anything. You get back the free cast Shiva, and draw a card. Don't freeze a forward with her if you wanted to. Just a good card. We do have our buddy Torgal. This is a 2-cost Wolf backup, category 16.
Oh.
The cost required to cast your job icon forward to job dominant forwards can be paid with CP of any element, and the priming cost of the forwards you control can be paid with CP of any element. So this is like the Shinju effect for dominance in particular in icons. It's a really interesting effect. I think icons and dominance are some of the least equipped to take advantage of this, though.
Yeah.
I think my only issue with this card. Because remember I was talking about how before, it's like each of these is... You're not playing 3 Clives, you're playing 6 Clives.
Right.
And you're playing 6 Jills. It's like, if you're playing Torgal, you're playing Jill. So you're playing 3 Torgal, you're playing 6 Jill now, that's 9 cards. Well, if you're in a multi-element deck, you could say, okay, we're going to add fire. Well, we add Joshua, and Clive. Now that's like 18 forwards. How many more forwards can you really afford to play in your deck? And it helps making, Joshua's priming cost now isn't triple fire. It's just 3 generic. That's really nice. It's useful for stuff like that. But I don't know that this like icon dominant deck by itself is going to exist. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if they add more in the future, he can only get stronger. I don't know if a multicolor one is really going to work. So I'll just kind of comment on the flavoring. Like, they both nailed the theme of him and also failed at the same time. Like, I understand why he's an ice given some of the lore that happens in the game, but he's also Clive's dog, so it's kind of weird that he like works with Jill specifically. And then like a lot of the icons and dominants are enemies and foes, so it doesn't really make any sense why he would be like helping them out. However, in that sense, I'm glad that they overrode theme and said no, like for the sake of the card being good, it needs to just like cover all of them. So yeah, I think he'll be very much tied to just how good that mechanic is, and I don't know if you'll want to have to run ice for him.
I think the theme is close enough. He brings, like, in the early game, he brings Sid, Jill, and Clive all together again, kind of at the start of it, and it's close enough.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think it's a really interesting card. I think it's got a lot of potential. It also, being a 2CP ice thing means Emina can search it as well, which makes it a lot more likely that such a weird ice deck could actually work.
Yeah.
Pisco Demon, this is Ice's version of these, attack and sack monsters. This one, when it's sacrificed, you choose 2 characters, you dull freeze them. It's okay. I think the biggest downside of it is that you're spending 4 CP to deny your opponent 2 if you hit 2 backups. But again, there's a lot of ways of cheating this into play for a lot cheaper than it might otherwise be, and 2 characters is actually quite a lot for a 2CP card to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
The going rate for that, you get 1 character, and a lot of them only get 1 forward, right? So I don't think that this is likely to be amazing, but I could see a world where it sees some play.
There's so many of these ice monsters that only freeze or only dull, so I was kind of shocked. It was like, oh, it dulls and freezes 2 things and their characters? Wow. Yeah, I mean, for that sense, I'm impressed. I think the only real reason you'll play this is with the next card we're going to talk about, because I think it combos very well with that. But other than that, I'm sure there's better monsters to play.
And I mean, if we think about a forward that chooses 2 characters and dull freezes them, every time that we resolve Laguna, you feel like the Opus 13 Laguna, it still feels okay today. Yeah. So, turning somebody into a one-time Laguna, you could do worse.
Yeah, true. Very true.
But here's probably, what people are interested in here, which is Bunavel's Mobius Job God. Category 13. When Bunavel's enters the field, you can put any number of forwards or monsters you control to the break zone. When you do so, your opponent selects 1 forward they control for each character you can put in the break zone by this effect, put them into the break zone, and your opponent has to discard a card for everything you sacrificed. So, this is one of the weirdest cards of the set. This, in a way, could be Ice's big board wipe they've been looking for. You stack a bunch of flans that don't have any other text, and you build this big field, and you go Bunavels, and you sacrifice all this stuff, and now your opponent has to sacrifice 4 forwards that and then they got to discard their entire hand, and they feel really, really bad, and then you punch them in the face, and then Kakayami hands you the trophy for being the world champion because you somehow pulled off something that I don't know ever actually is going to happen. I feel like this card's best friend is probably, like, it's got to be Realm, right? Like, you have to immediately think, like, Ice, Water. Realm gets you 2 monsters and 3 characters if you sacrifice all of them immediately, and, you know, those monsters can all draw you cards. That seems really cool. I just now that I'm rereading it, I'm realizing it's 2 separate autos, so you don't get to, like... If you could sack like 5 monsters and then get Amaterasu or Leviathan, and you're just kind of like, okay, cool. You know, this doesn't hit monsters at all, so if your opponent's like on a monster deck, they just don't care. So I don't know. I think it could be really obnoxious if you just sack a bunch of dead monsters off. You know, goodness knows Water and Earth and Ice all have like a bunch of dead monsters they could play, and be like, Earth can like play those monsters, like stall the game out, prevent them from attack, and then just Boonavels, all your forwards are gone, discard your hand, please, you know, and I win. It seems like a lot of work, though.
It's just Hobby Japan. Come on, I'm begging you. Just give me an ice board wipe. No conditions, just when it enters the field, dull freeze the board, or wiped out the dull forwards, whatever, like... I think everyone realized pretty quickly, like, you have to use monsters for this. I cannot see a world where you're giving up, like, 4 of your own forwards and somehow coming out ahead, and then they have to have a bunch of forwards, too. Like, there's so many conditions. If you can do it with the monster, like, the idea, again, of sacrificing that Pisca Demon, that now you add 2 Dull Freezes to their backups on top of it, or Opkalu, or some of these water monsters that have already done their jobs, like... Sure, that sounds great. Like you said, it's the double when. Like, if it was an if, I'd be so much more into it, because then at least if they stop it, you can keep all your monsters and potentially try again. But then if you give them all up, like, I like with all the Ice Legends, like, I want to see it do well, but it sounds like so many conditions. I think really one of the saving graces for this is that you actually don't have to play it in Ice. You could just put this in a mono deck, and as long as, or like a monster deck is what I meant to say. There's nothing that says you have to use like Ice characters or Ice monsters. So maybe there he'll be able to do something. I don't know.
I will say, like, the effect sounds so brutal, though, right?
Yeah, if it goes off, yeah. If you wipe out 3-4 forwards and then they lose their hand, like, you should just win off of that.
Like, and like that by itself has to make it be like at least worth considering, I imagine. And like, in a pinch, he can even sacrifice himself. Like, there's not even a restriction on that.
Yeah.
So, you know, I could see that even being a thing you do, where you sacrifice 2 monsters plus Boonavels, and then like Cleon seems like a match made in heaven because it protects him from Amaterasu, and then if you have to sacrifice the Cleon for whatever reason, Cleon draws you a card, then refunds some of it. Like, it's so interesting. Like, this is like probably like compared to like Cecilestat, where we read it and we go like, "There's no way," right? This is a card that at least like it really makes you think like, is this something that we can pull off? And I love legends like this. I just don't know. Like, I like my gut feeling is going to say like, well, if you can stack all these monsters, you can win some other way, but there isn't a way to do what this card does. Maybe this is the best thing you could do with monsters. I don't know.
Maybe.
We have Velis. This is another one of our Warrior of the Crystals. Whenever he or a Warrior of the Crystal enters your field, choose a forward, dull it, and freeze it. The only thing I'm going to say is I think this is the best of these Warrior of the Crystals. It does something. It's got a burst. It keeps doing things as you keep playing more and more of these Warriors. That is relevant, despite the fact these cards read like Dookie to me.
Yeah, he's kind of like their own version of a Last One Legend.
Yeah. Medius, this is the common summon. 2 cost, EX, category 12. Choose one of the following 2. You can either choose a dull forward of 3 or less and break it, or you can dull a forward and draw a card. Seems like one of the best Ice EX burst is like the immediate thing that comes to mind for me. It's either a draw or actually let's get that Zidane or that Refia or let's get that Axstar out of there, right? Like, if it's going in off of a burst, they've got a dull forward at least no matter what, right?
Yeah.
And they've always got a forward you can choose to draw a card if it's they've got a big 4 cost forward. I think it reads okay. It's nice that, if it is dead, you could just choose a forward. You could choose your own forward. Like, say you really need to dig for, like, you get your Budavels, you can dull your own forward and draw if you need to. Or maybe they've got a forward in their hand that they searched last turn. You know you got to get it out, so you got to find that Rufus. And if you don't draw the Rufus, you're going to lose anyway, so you might as well dull your own forward after your attack to get to the Rufus. Again, these are all, like, niche things, but, like, these are the kind of things that ice summons haven't done in the past.
Yeah.
There have been plenty of times I've Cullen my own card to try to draw a card to find Amaterasu. That I think that Madius could do similar things here. I think the card's just good.
Yeah, I think its power, it says more about the other ice summons we have, but like, because I'm not like super excited about it, but I definitely don't hate it. It's like, oh yeah, that one actually seems playable.
That actually seems playable. We'll put it on this card's review.
Yeah.
All right, we got new mode. This is the ice of the sack a forward if your forward entered your field this turn backups. This one's kind of not my favorite of them. It just dulls and freezes a forward. It'll be really nice to help push for lethal. You could go.
Yeah.
If you get like a bunch, one of these down, then you go like a Surges, you dull one, you crack this, you dull freeze the other one. Now your two remaining forwards get in to end the game. And like I said, ice has room for backups like this because ice has so many backups in a mono ice deck that is trying to play. So maybe there is room for this card in there. I actually didn't consider that until now. Like, if you're playing 20 backups, having some number of them be, breakable for some cool value and, staying alive longer in a control deck is really nice. Notably as well, maybe you back attack a Sephiroth and then sack this to get something else too, like dull freeze something else. That could be cool. So, I kind of like it.
Yeah. No, you said it all. Nothing else to add.
And that's it for our ice. I think it's a really interesting set for ice. I'm like really excited to mess with Bunavels and see if this crazy finisher can do anything. Genesis is another ice got a lot of really weird build arounds this set, and a lot of just kind of interesting utility cards in between the Kurame and the Madius. I think it's and the Terra as well. Terra's a great utility card for ice.
Agreed.
Stick around and you can find out what we think of Wind.
Bye.